Apple, in fact, has now sent out a fresh round of threat notifications to certain specific users in India, along with 91 other countries. The threat notification email was sent on Thursday, on 11th of April, to impacted users in India. Now, Apple has warned certain users that their iPhone could have been potentially attacked by mercenary spyware, including Israeli spyware Pegasus. Apple has not attributed this time around the recent wave of attacks to any one particular stakeholder. Now, Apple, remember, had sent similar notifications last October. The attack targeted opposition leaders across parties, warning them, and I quote, of a potential state-sponsored spyware attack on their iPhones. The company, after enough pressure, later clarified that it does not attribute threats to any specific state-sponsored attacker. This time around, the wording has changed, but it remains clear that Apple is stating iPhone users could be under attack. This comes at a very crucial time, weeks to go for the national elections in India. It looks like certain individuals specifically are being targeted.
But Shweta, I think, again, what's important to note is that there are 92 countries where these threat warnings have been issued, these threat notifications have been issued, and India is one of those 92 countries. Now, we don't know which constituencies are under attack from this mercenary spyware, Trojan, so to speak, or a malware. So we don't know whether it's the opposition parties or journalists or other independent analysts, etc., who would perhaps be victims to these attacks or would be more at risk to becoming prey to these attacks. But I think what's important to note is that the wording between October's threat notification and the one issued yesterday has changed, and it's no longer being referred to as a state-sponsored attack. Now, remember in October, when the state-sponsored attack had first surfaced, and the discussions that we had and the communication that we received from Apple back then also clearly suggested that there is no way for Apple to know, given how advanced these malwares are and these spywares are, for Apple to know who is behind these attacks. These are sophisticated tools, sophisticated Pegasus-like software, apparently, which get injected into mobile phones of certain users. And Apple's job is to understand, decrypt that, yes, it is a spyware, and then issue relevant notifications and warnings to its users to protect their data and to protect their privacy from getting compromised, on any Apple-based platform, iPhone in particular. Now, this time it's refraining from using state-sponsored, because state-sponsored in October was construed as, because the attacks the notifications were received mostly by opposition political parties. I think the questions that were being asked of Apple were that, by state sponsorship, are you trying to say Indian state is behind it? And that is something that Apple did not sort of, say yes to, neither did it very vehemently say no to, and it was pretty much left at that. Apple did, however, say that it's going to participate with CERT-In, which is India's own sort of, nodal body to fight cyber criminals and cyber crime, and that investigation would have perhaps, should have completed by now, but we really don't know what came out of that investigation as well. Now, coming back this time around, I think Apple is again suggesting that, these are regular threat warnings that get issued. In fact, from the year 2021, as many as 150 countries, and we are what, about 202, 203 countries in the world. So almost, 3/4 of the countries across the world have received threat notifications of some kind. And the fact that this time around it's not calling it state-sponsored or state-driven malware attack, it's just using the term mercenary. I think just to broad base it, that by state, it need not necessarily mean a particular government. And these are some smart, sophisticated cyber criminals out there which are going ahead and trying to probe into your devices.
Very difficult to ascertain as to why people in the opposition would be attacked by a different country apart from people within the country. So when you know that people who've been attacked are journalists, advocates, they are opposition leaders and prominent faces for that matter, people who are critical of the ruling dispensation, when they are being attacked by a spyware, it is not difficult to point as to who is behind these attacks, especially when you had Apple stating that it was state-sponsored last year. There's been a change of sorts in the vocabulary that Apple has sent out by the way of that threat notification. However, who could these individuals be, and what sort of interest do they have in attacking opposition leaders?
So, honestly, that's all a function of, at some level, speculation, at another level, deep deep investigation, and we really don't know what that certain investigation has eventually revealed. But you know, it's not surprising pretty much, because you had an Israeli spyware called Pegasus, which had also intruded into mobile phones of multiple opposition leaders, state leaders, as well as journalists and many high-profile individuals out there. We don't know who was behind Pegasus. We just know that it's an Israeli-built software. So would you then say that is it the Israeli government behind it? Why did they develop it? Did they develop it on the behest of another country's government? So, you know, these are all pretty much, you know, speculations, and these are all questions which remain unanswered. But what we know for a fact is that there are threat notifications issued again this time around, but we haven't seen the kind of rancor we saw last time around on social media to know exactly who are the folks out there who have received these threat notifications.
All right.
So I think it's important not to narrowcast it into a discussion on opposition versus ruling dispensation, but keep it a little broader to understand why are software and spyware so difficult to track and so difficult to prevent in a closed ecosystem like Apple's.
And it is difficult to track, which is what Pegasus is built around, a very hard system that is very difficult to crack, and which is what's happening in India at the moment. The question, of course, we're asking on this broadcast is, who is responsible for these attacks, the spyware attacks that Apple has once again warned specific individuals of? Attacks on their phones. This is a very crucial time for India. We are heading into general elections. We don't know who's behind these attacks, but of course, a deeper investigation is in the merit for these attacks.